Welcome back to the Clear to Close podcast. Today we have Gregory Traynor joining us. Greg is a licensed broker in Ohio and Kentucky and a member of the Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky Association of Realtors. He has served as president of the Southern Ohio Association of Realtors, and Greg brings over 34 years of experience in the real estate brokerage sales, management, title insurance, and lending to the table today. Throughout his career, he has overseen and managed over 60,000 real estate transactions, contributing significantly to his team's multiple Elite Club Platinum Production Awards. As a lifetime resident of the area, Greg's insider knowledge is invaluable, and we're excited to have him on the podcast today. Welcome, Greg.
Well, thank you, Josh and Trey. It's good to be with you guys. Appreciate it.
So, Greg, can you just start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and the experience you have in the real estate industry?
Sure. Second generation in the real estate industry. My parents were in it before, in both the mortgage side and the title side. Got into the business back in 1987, fresh out of high school. And I was a lot smarter than everybody else that was going to go straight to college. Yeah. I think minimum wage back then was about $2.80. And my father was at a title company in Cincinnati, and I got offered $5 an hour. So all the suckers went to college right away, and I was rolling in the dough back then.
So you were in the big savings and loan world back then, right?
Back then, it was right before the big crash when the savings and loans started going belly up. So it was interesting times back then. It's always something happening in the real estate industry. But eventually realized I needed to go to college, and so the title business was a blessing to me, and that's how I got to know TechneTitle. I started my own abstracting company where we did title searches, and one of our first clients was TechneTitle. So there was always a great relationship for the past, I guess that's 35 plus years now. My business morphed into a full-service title company at one point, and my wife and I ran that until 2006 when we sold it to a large national insurer. And at that time, in 2006, funny story, I planned on retiring, and my wife stayed at the title company. And I must have called her 30 times that next day. And, how's that deal going? How's our clients doing? And just couldn't let go of it. And she just said, you need to find something to do, Greg. And I always had a passion for real estate agents, had a lot of respect for them and what they do for a living. It's a tough job. They're always having to hustle for business. And then once they get that business, they're so involved in helping their clients. And that's the thing that I liked about the real estate side of the business was on the title side of the business, I hope I don't offend anybody, but it's very transactional. The relationships that you create are with the lenders and the real estate agents. I always envied the side of the real estate agent that created those relationships with the consumer. I would have real estate agents come into closings, and they would be talking about it was the child of the person that they sold their house to. And I thought, wow, what an amazing thing that you build that level of trust with those people that they're willing to refer their children to you as you pass them down. So like I said, in 2006, wife told me to get a job or a hobby, and I decided to purchase a franchisor, a regional portion of a franchisor's realty executives, and stayed with them for quite a bit. We opened up offices across Ohio, Kentucky, and West Virginia, and we started opening up our own offices in the greater Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky area. Since then, it's evolved into our own private label, which is Wyndham Lyons Realty Services, which is privately owned and operated, and we still operate in greater Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky. So that's where I'm at now.
So with over 30 years in the industry, is it those personal relationships or just the passion for real estate that keeps you going?
Both. I love the entire industry. I've been fortunate enough to be on the title side, which gave me a good overview. Title companies are the conductors that make sure that things are put together according to the contracts, that the realtors and the lenders are all in coordination to get people to the point of closing. And so I got to see the different facets of the industry. And on the real estate side, and owning a real estate brokerage, and also at one point owning a mortgage brokerage, just having that well-rounded knowledge and understanding of the business, and just absolutely love it. Love the dynamics, how you have a group of people that are working in coordination to help people achieve their American dream. I mean, how fortunate are we that we get to be a part of that? Part of freedom and part of being an American is that unique opportunity to own something, an asset in real estate. So that's always something, and I've always been a student. This, as you both know, even though I've been in the business for 35 plus years, I call Trey to ask questions. You're always learning. It's always dynamic. It's always changing. And I know we're going to talk about some of those changes that are going to affect clients. But that's where I find the passion, is helping people through and clarifying that process. It's confusing. You only, as a buyer or seller, you only do it once every 7 to 10 years. So how can you possibly know all the nuances? So that's what I love, helping and guiding people through those transactions.
Yeah. Now Greg says that he calls me, which is true, but I've definitely sat in on at least one, if not two, continuing educations where he actually taught me about real estate as it relates to. He was teaching the Bar Association about probate and estate and high pressure situations. Yep. So I think we'll get to that maybe a little bit later.
We all learn from each other.
Yeah.
And that creates a great atmosphere for our clients, that we're all continuing to sharpen our skills and knowledge to help them out.
Yeah, so as Trey mentioned, you have some expertise in high pressure like closing situations such as divorce. Can you just talk a little bit about that and how that adds complexity to buying or selling or the real estate transaction?
Sure. Part of what I do, we practice all types of real estate, residential, commercial, leasing, in different facets, but I found a passion in helping people through medium to high conflict real estate transactions, and those involve divorce and probate. My certification as a certified divorce real estate expert, very proud of. That's a hard designation to get. It's not just one of the alphabet designations that you can pay NAR a couple bucks and spend a couple hours. This was a program through the Alumni Institute. They only accept 5% of the applicants that come through. They're vetted as based on experience, based on production and knowledge. Before we get in, we're actually grilled by a panel of judges and magistrates to make sure that we're going to fit the program. But what that course does in the training and certification, and it's not just the 6 months that we had to spend getting that certification, it's weekly mentoring, it's weekly collaboration with other real estate experts, judges, and magistrates to make sure that we're serving the legal community and those clients. These are folks, and what we say with the divorce practice is, these are good folks on their worst behavior. They're going through, if you look at the Holmes Ray stress rankings, typically loss or death of a spouse is number one, divorce is number two. But we rack these scores up. Somebody that's going through divorce, it's an indicator of difficulties mentally and emotionally, and we're putting all those numbers together, and these folks are just going through a terrible time. And the real estate is an asset. It's just another thing for them. If it is medium to high conflict, it's just another big asset for them to argue about. So we have specific training on how to mitigate that conflict between those parties to make sure that the attorneys and those clients don't get caught in and wrapped into things that have nothing to do with the sale of that asset. So we keep it moving forward. We have proven, and let me start that over again. We have proven processes that are followed religiously to make sure that we can document every portion of the the process for the attorneys and the court in case we're brought in to testify as an expert. So there's a lot of training, and there's also a lot of emotional training and emotional intelligence training that we have to go through to recognize a lot of these cases have abuse. They have emotional or mental issues that pop up during the transaction, even drug issues or substance issues that we have to make sure that us as a neutral third party that's trying to progress this sale of the real estate forward, that we don't get mired down into those or allow the clients to let those things distract them. We also have to be emotionally intelligent enough to be aware that we all have biases, and that when there is one of those issues that are causing high conflict between the clients, that we can filter those things out and make sure that we're not allowing ourselves to be biased towards one client or another because of those issues.
Can you just talk a little bit more? So are you representing both sides of this? So both sides of the high conflict?
Both sellers.
Both
yes.
sellers. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's like a conflict almost as if
is.
you're representing a buyer and a seller, and usually
Absolutely.
things go well,
Yeah.
right? But when they don't,
Right.
that's where the rub comes.
And that's where they call us in. If it's a typical, not typical, there is no typical divorce. They're all very unique. But on the medium to high conflict cases, that's where we're needed. If it's a separation or there's a dissolution with a separation agreement, they're typically agreeing on most items. They don't need us with that. We'd love to still sell their house, of course, but it's when the parties can't agree. And in the old days, what would happen is the judge would just get frustrated with the parties and say, I'm going to pick 3 names out of a phone book. You guys just pick whichever folks that you just put your finger on a name, and we'll choose who that real estate agent is to sell the house.
It's a great way to develop a relationship, right?
That and those folks, we've had people at our own office who've gotten that phone call, and they're terribly prepared for what they're about to go through. There is not one of our cases that aren't without challenges, and if we don't have that training and that process that we adhere to, it's going to derail itself. And for the attorneys that are involved, for them, they don't have time to get mired and down in the muck of the real estate sale. They've got child support. That's really, in most cases, the biggest issue and the most important is the child and the family, making sure they're protected. And when you have a real estate agent that isn't proficient in moving these cases forward, you're distracting yourself. And you as an attorney could probably say the real estate it's very important for the family, but there are other things that are more important, and you can't allow a non-professional, non-trained person to get the case or off the rails.
Yeah,
So-
it's almost never, the real estate's almost never the most valuable thing in your life. It is,
Right.
at the end of the day, a thing, right?
Right.
And I hope, the people in this world still value people over things,
Right.
right? So if they've got kids, they got family members in conflict, everything like this.
Right.
But they will filter that into the real estate transaction.
Correct.
Oftentimes.
Yeah.
And so it's an interesting concept of keeping the emotions in it a little. You can't completely take the emotions out. You raised your kids there, whatever, but you can put a little bit of a barrier on the emotions.
Right. And the big things, too, that happen to derail the case or really mess things up is most real estate agents don't know how to read a court order and how it applies to the transaction. One of our biggest things that we run up against, and we do what's called an intake with both parties prior to even walking through the house, so we can get some type of idea of what we're up against. One of the biggest things is there a restraining order? Most real estate agents don't know to ask that question. And we have what's called an in-spouse, the person that's at the home, that's staying there, and typically the out-spouse who's already moved out. If there's a restraining order, and we are often we have the client that's the out-spouse try to get into the house. Maybe they have a personal item. They may have just want to check in on the house and just snoop. We have to be well aware of that And we have to put down rules and guidelines in our brokerage to make sure that we're not allowing one of those clients to violate that court order to get in and perhaps put somebody in danger. So whether it's an open house, whether we're monitoring the showings of that home, or just not taking a simple request from somebody saying, hey, I just need to get in and get my toolbox, we're very guarded with those types of items.
I have kind of an interesting offshoot of that, which is good or bad, marriage seems to be falling away from the norm, at least the traditional marriage where you whatever, date, get married, then buy your house. Well, we're flipping that, right? And we have a lot where you're date, marry, or date, buy house, have kids, whatever, maybe eventually get married. What happens? Have you had those in the interim?
Yes, and I think what you're talking about is where
Partitions.
Right.
Yeah.
So I actually have one that was assigned to me 2 days ago, and I've got to go visit the property tomorrow to do our preliminary assessment. That's exactly what happened, and it gets complicated because they weren't married when they purchased the property. The spouse that's currently staying in the home, her father gifted $39,000 in equity to that property to help them purchase it. So there was no agreement, which that's not part of what we do. Sure. We're there to sell the real estate, but I hear the story and I think, oh my goodness, the dynamic on that one is going to be interesting for the attorneys to try to figure out, okay, whose half is which half and how do they protect what the dad gave them as a gift of equity, not gift of equity, a gift to be able to purchase that property. So it gets very complicated.
Yeah, and sometimes they'll fight over the legal stuff and the money at the end of the day, but sometimes they feel like that all has to be sorted.
Yes.
Before they even think about selling the real estate.
But that's what adds another layer of complications to it, and the importance to have a trained certified divorce real estate expert is after the attorneys parse that out, they hammer out the agreement, we have to be able to read those agreements and be able to instruct the title companies. Now, I don't have to instruct you because you do a great job, but you would be shocked at what we see with other title companies unless we micromanage them. They'll just willy-nilly write a check to anybody and not pay attention to those types of agreements. We have instructions from the attorneys. We read those divorce decrees and separation agreements to make sure that the title company disperses exactly the way the court agreed, or they agreed with the court to disperse. So if you have somebody that's not a professional and they're not reading those things, perhaps that client, the other person, would get their part of that $39,000 at the closing table. Good luck getting that back.
Possession is 9/10 of the law, they say, right?
Yep. And then what I would get is a practicing real estate professional is a call from the attorney saying, how could have you allowed that to happen?
Yeah.
And it doesn't with us.
And then there's a vice versa to that.
Right.
From a title company perspective, sometimes you get a contract that comes through and they're getting a divorce, and it just, maybe in an email they say they're getting a divorce. Sometimes they don't even say that.
Right.
And then the first thing I'm looking at for when I get that title exam back is there a restraining order?
Right.
Are they allowed to sell this property?
Are they allowed to even sit in the same closing room together? Which that's where, to be honest, going back to my title days, that's where my passion for this specific specialty came up. We were not told by the real estate agent or anybody that that there was abuse. The one spouse walked in with a cast on her arm, 2 black eyes, and just, I didn't recognize what was happening until the soon-to-be ex-husband walked into the room and the person lost control of themselves. Wow. Because it was the other person who had abused them. They actually had a restraining order, and if we were told up front that those 2 people should have never been in the same room together, number one, the emotional distress of the one spouse was horrifying to watch. But we could have made accommodations to close early, and we do. I mean, that's one thing that we have a closing this afternoon with one spouse at our office, and the other spouse isn't coming until next Monday. to sign her portion of the documents because of that issue. So we have to be we have to be trained and very guarded to protect those parties and to keep the process moving forward.
Ask questions, recognize the warning signs,
Yes.
and go on, get it done, right?
Yep.
What advice would you give to a real estate agent that maybe is dealing with a case like this, but doesn't have the training or certifications that you do?
To be honest with you, I know this sounds self-serving, but do your clients a favor and at least let them know there's such a thing as a certified divorce real estate expert that are trained to handle these types of cases. In real estate, we're always told, stay in your lane. If you don't have a specific expertise in some type of transaction, whether you're a residential agent and your friend asks you to sell a commercial property, you should probably say, that's out of my wheelhouse. Because once you step into those lanes that you're not familiar with, that's when you invite getting sued for malpractice.
Yeah.
So my advice to those agents is when you recognize a medium to high conflict divorce case and you're in over your head, there's other real estate agents that are specifically trained to do that. You might want to just refer that deal over to that other agent so it serves your client better.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. If you'd like to get in touch with Greg, you can click the second link in the description. It'll head straight to Greg's page, theshowcaseteam.com or wyndhamlions.com. And if you're looking for services or just have questions about this topic specifically.
And I'm not sure if it would be okay, because the other thing that I'd like to talk about is the probate side of the business.
Absolutely.
Because it's is charged as the divorce side, sometimes even more. And
You mean all the kids don't get along
no,
every time?
It's amazing when you throw a bunch of assets and money in the middle of a room and the kids don't get along. But you're already dealing with people that are suffering from grief. They've lost somebody. And that's where we love to help. A lot of the times those homes are not in good shape. The parents were probably infirmed, or whoever it was maybe sick before they passed away, so the properties become dilapidated. They're not repaired. So we instituted a program to help those folks. Same thing with the divorce. We have processes and procedures that we adhere to make sure that the kids aren't fighting, that the person who's supposed to be signing the documents and has authority through the will or the court to do so are the proper parties. We set the expectations for them, and then we help the estate administrator or executor keep that moving forward to get it sold. We also work with the attorney that represents the estate closely to make sure, and it's funny because when we do give milestone updates and make sure that they're brought into the loop, they'll always say, I've never had a real estate agent pick up the phone and make sure that the person actually has the authority to sign those documents, that they need copies of the wills or the appointments. And then we also conduct what's called broker price opinions, which local court rules will dictate whether those are taken or not in lieu of full appraisals. So we help the family through that process of looking at what the potential value is for the estate and give recommendations for repairs and resources for those, because when mom or dad passes away or your spouse and the house is in disrepair, typically they didn't leave a lot of money for you to do those repairs. Well, just by doing a few $1,000s in upgrades and improvements, if we can help you with that, and it returns another $30,000 to $40,000 for your family, that makes a huge difference. Mm-hmm. So those are some of the things that we've been doing on that side of the business to help to mitigate the conflict between the siblings or whoever's inheriting, and improving those properties so they maximize their return.
Yeah, and I mean, oftentimes that's the same as in a standard real estate transaction where you come ahead of time and say, what repairs do you need to make?
Right.
What repairs do you not need to make? You don't need to go buy all new top-of-the-line appliances, right? In most circumstances, I would assume. But sometimes a new coat of paint, maybe a new roof, those types of things, the ROI on it is significantly more valuable.
And when you don't have the money to do it and you're waiting on the sale of the property, it's a catch-22. You know the money's going to be there, but and that's that's where we step in and just say, we'll help with those things, and we'll connect you with the people that can get those repairs done, and we'll collect those items at the closing to be able to return you 2-3 times as much as we're investing into the property.
Right.
Awesome. Let's shift gears a little bit. Can you talk about the recent changes to the NAR settlement and what you see the impact being on the industry?
Yes. Recently, as a result of the class action lawsuit, we're required to disclose our commissions differently. And it's not necessarily that we, in particular in the greater Cincinnati and northern Kentucky area, didn't think that we were completely transparent about how real estate commissions work. But evidently some courts did, and they thought that it was time for a change. So going back to the way the system works is the seller pays the real estate commission to the listing broker, and then that listing broker is authorized by that seller to share a percentage or a portion of that with whoever procures a buyer. And I don't want to talk about particular commission structures just because it's not set in stone. Real estate commission has always been negotiable. But what we're trying to do is impress on people that there are so many different structures with real estate brokerages, with real estate commission, that you can interview and find different brokerages that charge flat fees, they charge percentages. Sometimes they have limited services, so they charge less. So there's a full menu of services. But now for the consumers, what it means is we have to have additional disclosures to the seller. So our documents have changed, and we have a specific conversation that we have the seller acknowledge that all real estate commissions are negotiable. There's no set fees. There's no laws saying that it has to be X percentage. And you, as a seller, don't have to offer a buyer's agent a real estate commission if you want to. Now, that's always been the case. They could have always said, I don't want to pay the commission to the buyer's agent, but now it's more transparent to all the parties. The second portion of that is that if you're a real estate agent that's representing a buyer, you now have to have a contract with that buyer to represent them before you show a home. And your commission to that buyer has to be explicit. And that's where the transparency, I think, is going to be most beneficial. A lot of the real estate agents that represented buyers knew that the seller paid the real estate commission. So they would use the terms, I'm free. No, they were never free. It's built into the sales price of the home. So that was not a very straightforward answer to what they were charging. So now the buyers are going to know what their real estate agent charges, whether it's 1%, 2%, 3% or a flat fee. It's going to be on the document. That agent cannot charge anymore. Let's say the real estate listing broker is offering 3%, and they had an agreement to only collect 2%. They can't collect the additional percentage point. So that agreement up front,
I didn't know that either.
Can't change. You can put it in writing for a change later. And I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but with builders, there's bonus.
Sure.
Builders offer bonuses sometimes to sell their homes, but it has to be in writing. And where that transparency is going to be wonderful for buyers, here's where the problem is going to come in. Our news media, which everybody knows, reports sensationalism, whatever gets the click or somebody to help them get more ad space, they'll say whatever they want without any fact checking to it. And when this settlement first came out, across the media spectrum, they were saying, you don't have to pay real estate commissions anymore. Congratulations, America. Homes are going to become cheaper. Neither one is going to happen. Because I can't work for free. I'm sure all my buyers and sellers that I've sat with and we've had this conversation get it. They know that if their boss came in the next morning and said, hey, really appreciate all the work you're doing, but on Friday you're not getting a paycheck, they know that they can't do that. So there is a cost for our services. Now we have to prove what our value is to our clients when they see that on paper and in writing. That's the great part. The bad part is if those sellers who have heard those headlines that you no longer have to pay a buyer's commission, and they have a real estate agent that can't explain what the ramifications of that are, then number one, they're not going to sell their house. Number two, they're going to sell it for less. And number three, there's going to be a lot of buyers out there that they can't afford to pay a real estate commission.
Right.
They're coming with all they have just to bring the closing costs and the down payment to the property.
Absolutely,
and then you
yeah.
layer something on top of that and expect them to pay it, it's not going to happen. The statistics are pretty clear. 95% of all buyers cannot pay the buyer's real estate commission. They have to ask the seller to pay it on their behalf. So if you're a seller and you realize that you're going to exclude 95% of every buyer that's out there, you're not going to sell your house that quickly. And when you do get that person in the 5% that does have the cash to do it, they're probably going to lowball your offer.
Yeah.
So they have to be educated to make the right choice and at least offer some type of finder's fee or suffer the consequences of a lack of buyers coming through your home. And for buyers, they've got to be educated that if they cannot afford those real estate commissions that they would have to pay for, then they have to have an agent that's willing to work with them to look at other alternative ways of getting that paid for on their behalf. Yeah. So ultimately, we all want transparency in our industry, and we want it to work well for our consumers. I just think that this is, in the short run, going to make it more difficult for buyers and sellers to get through the process until we iron out our own industry.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty radical change.
It is.
Right? Because just generically, the average home buyer knows that they aren't paying the commission out
Right.
of pocket. But every professional that comes into a real estate transaction typically does not work for free.
Right.
They still have to put food on the table for their kids, right?
Yep.
They still have to put food on the table for their spouses, whatever, right? So, and things are getting more expensive, right? And the commission structure, as far as I know, has always been relatively customary.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to some people that have been in the business as long as you, and they'd say it used to be standard in this area, at least at 7%, and
Mhm.
it's kind of trickled down to 6%. It's negotiable somewhere in that range, right? It's
Yep.
always negotiable.
Right.
But at the end of the day, if you know that you're going to lose money
Right.
on this transaction, if you agree to a 3% commission total, then are you likely to take the business? Maybe.
Right.
If it's a friend of a family member or something like that, and you just want to help them out.
Well, here's a dirty secret of our side of the industry. And we joke about it. There's a reason why we're called brokers, because we have less money. People see those commissions that are on the settlement statement, and they think, oh my goodness, the real estate agent's just crushing it. Well, behind the scenes, we're the same as every other business. We have support staff. We have marketing that we pay for. I don't know many real estate agents that don't work more than 50, 60 hours a week, that work really hard.
Nights, weekends,
Yep.
always on call.
And national averages, the net to gross for a brokerage, if you're successful, is a 7% profit margin on your brokerage. That's not 7% of the sales price of the house. That's 7% of every dollar that you take in that the brokerage actually keeps. That's a successful brokerage. There are many brokerages out there that offer other ancillary services that rely on those, and their regular operations lose money or just break even. So even though it looks like brokerages are making a ton of money, if you ask real estate agents to take a step from, and I hate to use percentages, but take a 25% haircut on their commission, when your margin's only 7%, that means that you're taking a deal and you're going to lose money. So those are the things the consumers don't necessarily need to know, and we know in our industry. That's why we're a mature industry. That's when you say they used to be this and they've whittled down. The real estate industry has been here for over 120 years as far as the National Association of Realtors. So we've whittled, and we're a very competitive industry. We are painfully aware that if we don't keep our prices competitive, that they can go down the street and get the same thing for a competitive price. Mm-hmm. So that's why I say, in a mature industry, I wouldn't expect it to whittle its way down that much.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
So we talked a lot about having the professional expertise on your side. Can you talk about the benefits of having somebody with a wealth of experience in your corner during a real estate transaction or in that high conflict divorce situation?
So two different things in that. First is making sure that you have a professional that understands the market that you're in. And by market, I don't just mean greater Cincinnati. You have different suburbs inside of those markets. I mean the market in general. That you have an agent that stays educated and stays up to date on the rules, how the economy is affecting real estate. For example, right now, even though our properties are increasing days on market, it's still a seller's market. There's still a severe shortage of homes. So if you have an agent that isn't well-versed and up to date on what the market is doing, and they're just relying on hearing that looking at a house and saying, well, it's been on the market for 15 days now. Typically, last year, in the last couple years, if they're on the market for 2 days, then something was wrong with that house. So if you misinterpret those numbers and items and you think that you're going to go in and undercut the sales price, or even when you do your homework, pull comparative sales, make an offer that doesn't make sense to that seller, you're not going to win that house for your client. So you're doing them a disservice. Conversely, 5 or 6 years ago, 7, 8 years ago, that was standard. I mean, listing price was a starting price, and we would undercut it based on knowing properties were sitting on the market for 6 to 8 months, and we could really chop some money off those prices. But having that expert that knows the market, it's right now in the type of market that we're in, it's not about you can't steal a property. That's not going to happen. What's going to happen is your agent's going to craft an offer that is attractive to that seller, and you're going to win it. So you need to have an agent that knows the market, that knows how to present those offers, and knows the pain points for that seller and how to bridge those to make your offer look amazing to them.
Yeah. So I'm kind of trying to think of some of the things in my head that can be that crafting of the offer. I guess sometimes it's a quicker sale, but whether you're under a potential foreclosure, distress, need to move, et cetera. What are some of the things that are in that?
Let me give you a big example. In buyers, right now we do have properties that are still going above list price. And as a real estate agent, I'm aware that right now the win is getting the home for my client. But at the same time, I want those clients to come back to me in 5 or 6 or 7 years when they're ready to sell, and not have to have the conversation of, woo, man, we paid way too much for that. Now you don't have any equity in your property. So we try to not only win the home, but to mitigate. We don't want them paying too much. So there's little tools such as an escalation clause where we can cap the amount that we want to sell and only beat other offers by a certain amount of money. So that way we can assure that you're not bidding $10,000, $15,000 over what that second best offer was. We're just small incremental amounts over what those are. So it keeps our buyers from having to pay too much for a property, but still win it.
Yeah. Do you find that that's more common in like unique homes, or is it just the market in general?
I would say not necessarily. I would just say the market in general. It's just from home to home. We know when we're walking in if there's 5 other real estate agents and buyers at it, or if we try to schedule it and the schedule's blocked out because there's so many people trying to show it, we need to be more competitive. And having a conversation with the listing agent to make sure we understand what the seller's motivations are.
Right.
Awesome. Well, Greg, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Yeah,
I learned a lot. Great insight.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Any parting words or last pieces of advice?
Just when you're talking to a real estate agent, if you're a consumer, make sure that they're well-versed in the specific type of property that you have. Make sure that they have experience. I'm a huge advocate for full-time real estate agents. So make sure that this isn't
just
a hobby.
Want your cousin listening because they do it 3 times a year.
It's a side hustle.
Yeah.
This industry lends itself to a lot of folks that just do this as a side hustle. they may be great, but I would say talk to a full-time real estate agent that immerses themselves in this profession.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you for watching the Clear to Close podcast. Please remember to like, subscribe, and comment. Thanks.
All information provided in this publication is for informational and educational purposes only, and in no way is any of this content contained herein to be construed as financial, investment, or legal advice or instruction. TechneTitle Agency, Inc. and the guests appearing on this podcast do not guarantee the quality, accuracy, completeness, or timelines of the information in this publication. While efforts are made to verify the information provided, the information should not be assumed to be error-free. Some information in this publication may have been provided by third parties and has not necessarily been verified by TechneTitle Agency, Inc. TechneTitle Agency, Inc., its affiliates, and subsidiaries do not assume any liability for the information contained herein, be it direct, indirect, consequential, special, or exemplary, or other damages whatsoever, however caused, arising out of or in connection with the use of this publication or in reliance on the information, including any personal or pecuniary loss, whether the action is contract, tort, including negligence or other tortious action.